Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur's sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppas with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
Welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. Oh my goodness, I love my podcast so much. And today's guest is a really wonderful lady who I have been working with, as well as got to know again through LinkedIn, all these fabulous LinkedIn connections. A beautiful lady called Synne Lindén. She's the director of Linden Tree. So I'm already thinking and feeling just lovely about all of that. It's fabulous. Welcome, Synne.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too, because obviously I know a bit about your story, and so I really want to have a conversation about that so that the listeners can appreciate your fabulous journey and of course what you do in your business, because it's a beautiful business. So let's start at the beginning.
Ooh, the very beginning.
Well, we never really know quite where that is. That's the thing, because I take people in different places. But I just want to tell the audience where you're from. Tell us where you're from.
Right. So I'm from Norway originally. That's where I was born and that's where I grew up.
Great. And where do you now live?
So now I live in Sweden, which is, and I am actually also today Swedish. I do have Swedish citizenship, but yeah, so not a very sort of long distance, but it has been a long journey getting from that short distanced place.
Exactly.
So to speak.
How amazing to start that conversation the way we did, because it's like, this is where you started, this is where you now are. Oh my goodness, what happened in between?
Yeah.
So much. Okay, and I've got to be really good and not talk to you for like 10 hours about this, because it's such a great story. So, and the other thing I really want to point out, because it always fascinates me and amazes me, is how beautiful your English is.
Oh, thank you.
It really is stunning, you know?
Yeah, well, I did cheat a little bit, because the thing that because usually when I start talking about my journey, I start with Swaziland in Southern Africa, but actually I should start with New Zealand, which is where I lived as a child for 6 months. So I got some sneaky, cheeky English kind of early training there as well.
Amazing. And if you've got any background noise going on there, listeners, it's because I put my dishwasher on. Now, this podcast is real. I pride myself on the podcast being real. And so any gurgling noise in the background is not my stomach. It's actually my dishwasher. So I apologize. So look, let's start. Where did you grow up? Tell me the story. I want you to take me around the world, because that's literally what you're going to do, Synne.
Yes. Okay. So I grew up outside of Oslo. So I grew up only about 20 minutes from Oslo, which is like the Norwegian capital. But I grew up in a very countryside place for being so close to the capital. So I grew up next to a huge lake and massive forests, and I always had, access to this vast nature and this vast forest land, woodland around us. And we had a big lot, and there was, all of my earliest memories are just of being outside and being in nature and with the trees and with the, there's so many pictures of me doing weird stuff in the garden, like just collecting snails in this, wheelbarrow, and just, yeah. So it was a really, it was quite a magical childhood. And then my parents split up, and that kind of put me on a bit of a move around Norway, and that is also the reason why my mom and I went to New Zealand for half a year. So I lived in New Zealand for half a year, and so I was 10 years old when I did that. And I think that the most important part of that experience was that I got to experience what it's like being an immigrant who doesn't speak the language properly. Because that's something that I've thought a lot about, coming back to Europe after my long travels, to that sort of attitude towards language, which really interests me because it's so easy to associate kind of mispronunciations or wrong wording or, poor sentence structure with kind of intelligence or stupidity, when it's really just a matter of words, so that was like a really cool, that's a good thing, I think, to have with you.
I think it's interesting to be very aware of that because, it highlights to me how much we assume about people, for one, which is a big part of my sales teaching, is for us to never assume. And so it's a really interesting thing that you become aware of. And then suddenly I think what did it do for you, that awareness?
Well, I mean, when I was there, it just really sucked because everyone... you're an outsider, you don't speak the language properly, you don't understand the culture fully, so you do all these things that to you are completely natural that to everyone else is super weird. Having the insight later in life, I think a lot of the places I've lived have kind of been challenging and difficult while I've been in them, and I think that's kind of the nature of life. Like when you're doing the work, it's tough, and then afterwards you come out of it and you have all this newfound, perspective, I guess. So we were in New Zealand, and then we went back to Norway. But the thing is, on our way to New Zealand, we traveled through America, and on our way back from New Zealand, we traveled through a bit of Asia. So I kind of got a taste for travel, and I guess different places and cultures, and also this notion of actually having to live somewhere for a while to kind of get a grasp of it at all.
Yeah.
So then when I was 17, which was so in Norway, kind of high school or upper secondary is 3 years. And for my last 2 years, I got a scholarship and I got accepted to go to an international boarding school in Swaziland, which is in southern Africa.
This is amazing, isn't it? I mean, people will not expect that you were going to say Swaziland. Maybe some other European country, but not Swaziland.
Yeah, no, it's and that was an experience. I mean, that was really cool because that's part of a kind of upper secondary movement called the United World Colleges, and they have schools all over the place. There's one in Wales, there's one in Canada, there's one in Norway actually, but I obviously didn't want to be in Norway. I wanted to go somewhere else. And so in my year we were 57 nationalities.
Wow.
So just kids the same age as you from all over the world, which was an amazing experience and also a very tough experience because I was coming from, a lot of independence, a lot of freedom, a lot of kind of trust from adults that I could take care of myself and I would do as I said, and then going to a boarding school where, the teachers come and lock the door to the dorm at, 9:30 in the evening. So it's a big...
I want to just stay with that for a minute. How did that make you feel, and how did that affect who you were as a person, do you think? Because you talked about this beautiful start in life, out in nature and this freedom and being outside. And now we're here, what are you, 17 you said?
Yeah.
And you're being locked in your dorm at 9:30 at night. I mean, come on, Synne. What happens to someone when you have that?
Maybe that's where a lot of my heavier authoritative issues manifested. I don't know. Yeah, I have never liked people telling me what to do if they can't give me a good reason for doing it. And this was very much, an old school kind of style school, so it was, you listen to the teachers were Misters and Mrs., which is not the norm in Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, we call our teachers by their first name. And so it was just like this huge culture shock. It was just, and also it should be noted that the summer before I moved to Swaziland, I also actually went on a 1-month interrail trip by myself with a friend of mine throughout Europe, so it was a really huge shift. So what it did to me emotionally is, I guess it was just really tough, really hard. I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up many times. I went home. So we had 3 terms a year, and I went home between each because I was so homesick. And in the first year, I was really like, Mom, I don't want to go back. Like, this sucks. And, determination and persistence is something that I pride myself on now. And it's something I'm very thankful that my mother has really, instilled in me. And so she said, because this was the first year of the 2-year program. So she said, well, you have to finish the first year, and then we can do a reevaluation at Christmas. If it's still awful, you can come back home and do your final year, because she didn't want me to kind of have to pick up on a new year, and fall behind. Yeah. But I did it. I finished. And so then while I was there, I had a teacher called Mr. Pugh, who was a Zimbabwean man, English Zimbabwean, or British Zimbabwean. And he ran a creative writing group at the end of, like, after school hours. And he is one of the first teachers to really bring that out in me as a passion and a pursuit in life. He told me, because I would complain about class being boring, he was like, well, write while you're in class. And I'm so thankful to him, because he was the first person who really, besides my mom, besides your parents, he was the first person who really, really told me that this is something you're good at, and you can do this. And I remember he told me on graduation day as well, he just came up to me and he said, these were his exact words. He said, Synne, keep writing, because you're really good at it. And it was so powerful. And at this stage, I had then decided to apply for a double major in creative writing and professional writing in Perth in Western Australia.
Oh my goodness, she's off again. I want to just exchange a teacher story, because it's interesting the influence our teachers have on us.
Yes.
It's really something. And I had some great teachers. I'll always remember them, their name, and even I can see them in my mind, how they looked, I'll have other teachers I can't actually quite remember, if I'm honest, although I am a lot older than you. And this one teacher was my English teacher. He was very strict. I've talked about him, I think, in some of my other podcasts. Very strict man, threw the board rubber at you, shouted at you and just glared and snarled at you was the best way to describe him. Horrid man. And when I left school and I went to him, this man I thought completely hated and detested me. He said to me, and my maiden name was Hold'em back then, not White. And he said, so what are you doing then, Hold'em? Like this. And because I took my books back. I was only 16. And I said to him, I'm going to work in NatWest Bank, sir. And he said, wonderful, job for life. Well done, like this. And it was like the first time he had ever said that I'd done anything good, So whilst it's more extreme than your lovely teacher, it was that moment where I thought, oh my goodness, I did something right for him, But he was very memorable, and I was so scared of him. But my English and my writing, I have to thank him for being able to do it as well as I do it,
Yeah, and it's so amazing. I've been lucky enough. This is actually what I did in 6 months before I went to Swaziland. Is I taught primary school, just like Norwegian and English, and it was, it's so amazing, but it also gives you so much respect for how much impact it has on children, because it is vast, that impact, good and bad,
Yeah. So we're on our way to Australia. Come on, let's carry on the journey.
So then I went to Australia. And you can imagine, having been locked up pretty much for 2 years at a boarding school, I'm now in Australia. I'm on my own. I'm a student. I have my own apartment.
You're free.
It was amazing. So, of course, the first thing I did was get a job as a bartender, because, what else would you do? Which is really, by the way, if anyone listening to this considers that, don't do it. It's really not great. So just don't, because you don't sleep ever, and it's just messed up.
Totally antisocial, really low paid, and just
So
working
bad.
all hours.
So prone to alcoholism. Just don't do it. I do not recommend it at all.
Oh,
but it's a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
it gives a lot of experience. And yeah, and I mean, so I studied creative writing and professional writing, which is a double major, which was just so fortunate. I'm so glad that I decided to take both majors, because it gave me both sides of the balance, so to speak, of the scales. So, you know, on the one hand, I had like editing and publishing, and on the other, I had writing poetry, etc.
Yeah, lovely.
And I just flourished in university. You know, it was just amazing, because I remember so many, you know, we would get our assignments and I would be like, this is an assignment? Like, this isn't even, this is fun. This is writing. I get to just write for 3 years. This is incredible. And it was so good. So while I'm like in the very end of my first year of university in Perth is when I meet my husband, my now husband. And he was also a bartender. I met him across the bar, super cliche, or however you want to call that. But the thing that wasn't cliche is that he is Swedish. So he was also in Perth studying across the world. And we met each other on an evening where the bar he worked at wasn't normally open. He wasn't supposed to have a shift. I wasn't even planning on going to this concert that I had been invited to. I decided last minute, and I got on the list. And because I knew one of the musicians who was playing, it was just like, it was crazy that we even met. And I'm so glad we did.
Oh, it's like serendipity, isn't it?
Yes,
I love
quite.
that so much. Wonderful.
So the thing about Aris is he was 1 year above me in uni, and Australian visas and immigration laws are really, really strict. So essentially what happened is he graduated and he couldn't get a visa, so he had to leave the country. And by this point we had gotten engaged. We got engaged very quickly, and we were kind of like, okay, so where are we gonna go? And my husband is Swedish, but his family is from Kurdistan in northern Iraq. And so he owned an apartment there, and I said to him, well, why don't we move there? That's an apartment, and we can live there, and you know, we can spend some more time with your family, and I can finish my degree. And I was able to talk the creative writing department into letting me finish my degree externally. Well, I had 3 lovely professors who said to the head of department, who had initially told me, no way, that we'll take her, so just let her go, and we'll have her finish her degree. So then we moved to Kurdistan together.
It's fabulous, isn't it? I mean, I'm just thinking about all these wonderful cultures and experiences that are so different to each other that you've had. And there's nothing more to make you so resilient than all of these big stepping outside your comfort zone decisions that you made at a young age. I mean, I'm in awe of this, because I've always been this home girl who stayed in the UK and never really traveled anywhere, you know. So it's amazing, really, to see the journey. And just to kind of talk again about this beautiful English you speak, you know, all of these moves presumably had a wonderful influence on keep on developing the English that you speak, yeah?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, in Swaziland, you know, the school, like the spoken language was, like the school language was English. In Australia as well, obviously, you know, I did my degree in English. So essentially, since, you know, age 17, except for a 2-year stint back in Norway, I have been primarily working and speaking in English. And it's also a conscious decision I've made to use the English language above the Norwegian one, or the Swedish one for that matter. I can't do written Kurdish yet. I can speak Kurdish, but I can't write it.
I was just going to ask you how many languages you speak.
Yeah, so it's 4, and 3 fluently and 1 kind of decent conversationally.
That's amazing. So you're in Kurdistan.
Yes. So we went there, and I would say probably, except for Swaziland, you know, because I was happy in Kurdistan because I was with my, you know, husband, and I was surrounded by family. but the cultural difference was so immense. And I didn't learn to speak Kurdish in Kurdistan. I've learned to speak that since. So I was kind of isolated linguistically, I was isolated culturally. And eventually I just, we were there for about 10 months. And then I said, I have to go back to something I know, because I can't, I couldn't make friends with the guys because that wasn't really culturally acceptable. But the girls were just so different, just completely different in so many ways. And so we moved back to Norway after. So then I had spent 6 years abroad. And they were key years. So when I came back to Norway, I found myself in another culture shock with my own culture, because I wasn't Norwegian anymore. I had picked up way too much in Swaziland, in Australia, and Kurdistan. So I just didn't fit anymore there. There was just so many things that had changed and so many things that were different about me. And so we really tried to stay there for, we stayed there for about 1.5 years before we both kind of realized that we were miserable there. We didn't like it. We didn't, we just didn't fit. It just didn't fit. And that is when we sold everything we owned and we moved to Bangkok.
Oh my goodness. I was expecting you to say Sweden, but there's another one in between.
There's actually 2 more in between.
2 more. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, so our Bangkok stint was very much a find ourselves stint, but it was pivotal to me because that is where I realized that I didn't fit into society's box, so to speak. I was never going to be happy in a job. It wasn't the different jobs that were getting me depressed. It was being stuck in the job and in the framework and in the box, Mm-hmm. And so that is really where that notion materialized for me, where I have to build something of my own. So this was in 2016.
Yeah.
And then kind of a similar thing, my husband had a similar epiphany. So he's always been very interested in Middle Eastern politics. His father was a big politician in Kurdistan. And so he applied for and got accepted into a master's program in international relations in Barcelona.
Oh, great.
And so then we moved to Barcelona. And that is where I did my sugar-free baking blog.
I love it. There's so much to you.
Oh, yes. All the layers.
So many things that you've done.
I have. I've been very fortunate in my life to experience as much as I have. And then the thing that happened in Barcelona is that, I didn't make any money blogging. I had lots of sponsors, but, getting into the blogging game it's a long stretch. And I just stopped enjoying it after a while. And the more I stopped enjoying it, the more I worked on what I then referred to as my side hustle, which was, translations and writing. And in 2017, in summer of 2017, is when I set up my kind of limited company, which was the precursor to Linden Tree. And then I got pregnant.
Oh yeah, so just something else in between. You got a beautiful little girl, haven't you?
Yes.
And how old is she now?
So she's 2 years and 3 months old.
Lovely.
Now.
Amazing.
And,
so like me, when I first started when I had my first business, Sam was 3 months old.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I've kind of done a little bit of that, the same as you.
Nothing
Absolutely. Nothing else like you at all. That bit I have, yeah. So
yeah, and that is when we moved to Sweden eventually. So when I was about 4 months pregnant, we were like, okay, Norway isn't for us. Sweden is kind of the next logical step when you're having children, because of course, my husband and I were very fortunate. We have Scandinavian passports. There is an amazing social security system in Scandinavia, just incredible support schemes and childcare and everything.
Great.
And so, so we moved to Sweden, and last year we bought our house in the woods.
Oh, it's just wonderful. You know, what a journey. And you're still young, you know, you really are still young. You've done all of this. It's fabulous. Well, look, let's talk about your business, because I want to make sure that we definitely cover that, because Linden Tree is very special, isn't it?
Yes, it is very special. And I think it's special for many reasons. Which has a lot to do with this journey of mine. But what I do at Linden Tree is I help businesses that want to grow while making a difference. And I help them with their storytelling culture and their writing. So essentially, I help businesses see the ways that they can use these incredible communication tools in just a completely new way for their communications, and transform into these storytelling pros, you know, who create genuine connections with their audiences.
And that's the key, isn't it? You know, you and I, obviously we've done some work together, and you know that I'm all about that connection and the messaging. And, you know, we can all talk about messaging and communication, but how many people really understand the depths of how important and magical it can be, you know?
And it's amazing. And I just, you know, this is becoming this thing that I'm saying where, you know, people binge Netflix, they don't binge webinars. People binge books, but they don't binge business blogs. And I would like to change that.
Nice. Yeah, I like the idea of that. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I only did a webinar the other day, this week, actually. So.
Oh, I did a webinar too, you know.
I know. Well, it's funny that, isn't it? Because I was desperate for you to do something like a webinar, because I just knew that would be so wonderful for you to do. And I know you'll do more. But I think, you know, and your videos are fabulous as well. I mean, they really are, because there's so much emotion and feeling in them. That's that connection piece that's really great about you, I think, Synne. So tell me about how, so I'm a company, obviously, and, you know, I don't know you, and I want to understand what you're going to help me with, you know, so how do I buy from you? You know, there's the question.
Yes, and so like with you, Jules, you know, it all depends on the person or the company, so to speak. But the core, I mean, the umbrella of it is that you learn to speak to your customer in a completely new way, but you also, it's kind of like lifting this veil and just seeing this hidden world of, you know, magic that you don't see unless you practice it. The webinar that I did this past Tuesday was on what I call story excavation, which is the what of storytelling. So figuring out where the stories are and what they are. And the conclusion is kind of, you know, a story is a meaningful experience. So as a business, if you want to connect with your customer and with your audience, you need to create a point of connectivity, first of all. You need to actually find some mutuality, which is, you know, a lot of the work we've done together, which is that empathy component, to really understand and not assume, but really understand and learn. And then it is sharing the meaningful experiences. So the biggest change and the biggest challenge for a business is that this means being vulnerable.
Yes.
It means that you have to be honest, and you also have to be truthful about who you're speaking to, because you're not going to appeal to everyone when you're honest.
No.
But that also makes the connection that much more meaningful.
Exactly.
You know?
And you know, I've always said you shouldn't, or you shouldn't. I've always said don't try and sell to everyone, because that's really actually not fulfilling. It's much more fulfilling when you sell to the right people who have that,
exactly.
I don't know, share values and just understand each other.
Exactly.
And I think one of the things that you're very good at is understanding and finding the stories within people's businesses. And then obviously you're able to, if they so want you to go even further with that, aren't you, Synne?
Exactly. And honestly now, you know, since the work we did together, I have these 5 kind of packages that I work with, which are all actually based on an emotive journey. So they're all based on taking you from a place of negativity or despair or feeling lost or feeling hopeless to feeling empowered and aligned, and it's such a privilege for me to hold that space. So like the product that's becoming one of my favorites is this product that I call Your Brand Story, which is where I do a 1-hour interview, either if you're a solopreneur or you're a, one person self-employed, whatever, I do an interview with you over an hour where I do story mapping and I do the fertile facts and I kind of piece together the voice and what you really want to say. And then I write a core narrative for your business. And so, parts of that or the whole thing can go on your About Us or our story page. But the difference is it'll be an actual story and it'll be something meaningful and true. Yeah. And the other kind of package that I just love is your storytelling roadmap, which is a cultural package. That's where we work together. We do 5 2-hour workshops, either one-on-one or in a team. And we just build the foundations of a storytelling culture that will just permeate and seep throughout your business, both internally and externally. And the thing is, human beings live on stories. That's how we connect. That's how we engage. We tell stories every day to each other. That's what we do. That's the human experience, is stories. So as a business, you can tap into that and you can speak to your customers in that way. But then you have to learn how to find those stories and how to convey them. And you have to get clear on your brand voice and all of these things that are actually kind of tools from creative writing, but they're applied to business communications.
Yeah. And of course, you've got that amazing background, all those fabulous qualifications. You're so bright and so clever to have all of that then backs up this. And then this whole place of understanding about business and how that connects. There's a lot about storytelling out there. People talk about storytelling a lot. I have connections. People have been on my podcast who are storytellers. And it's fascinating because they come at it from slightly different angles. But ultimately, a story is only ever as good as how well it connects to you, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And also in that connection is, how it is crafted, because this is the thing, you're absolutely right. Storytelling is a buzzword at the moment. Everyone likes to say they're a storyteller, which is fine, as long as you appreciate that there is a difference between telling a story and crafting a story, or telling a crafted story. Yeah. And there is a pretty big difference, and there is a just such a vast amount of structures and frameworks and tools that get lost when people read one book where one narrative structure has been used. A very popular one is The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
Which is, a great narrative structure, but it's just one of thousands.
Thousands, yeah. And I think when you can really let yourself go and have that real freedom with storytelling, alongside somebody like you who can really guide and hone in on it, because that's the skill of having someone like you, Synne. We can all remember our stories and we can tell our stories, but as you say, that crafting, but the freedom of crafting them, I think isn't that lovely that you kind of create that environment for people to do that?
Yeah. And I just, I did a brand story this week with just the most lovely lady, and I sent it off to her, and she got back to me and she was like, it made me so emotional, because because
it was good.
Because it was good. And she was like, it was me, and I just it's quite a personal thing, it's quite a deep digging thing. And I really do take it as this really quite big privilege that, business owners or business teams are willing to let me kind of hold that space for them, and where they can be vulnerable and they can be honest, and then they can get that real thing, that's real authenticity out there,
It's great. I love what you do. I really do. And I think, having chatted to you on this podcast, you can sort of hear how your journey's been from when you were a little girl right through to all those amazing diverse experiences to coming back to Sweden, where you then settle with a baby of your own, you know, isn't it wonderful? And then, you know, doing something you totally love. It's a really lovely journey to listen to, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really glad that I got to tell it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And and I think that's also, you know, having been to all these places and having interacted with all these different cultures and people, and it's just brought that, I guess, empathy, because that's the thing I hear most from people I work with, is that, you know, they say you're a great writer, you obviously know what you're doing, which is lovely, but what they say, and what really I hold dearly, is they say that I'm empathetic. I actually understand them, or at least emotionally I connect with them. And, you know, that's what storytelling and writing is about. It's about the emotional connection. And, you know, everyone knows that, you know, from a sales perspective, trust drives sales. And I believe that stories drive trust.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. And you are empathetic, but what you also bring from your story is this breadth of experience of what the world really looks like, not what we think it looks like, but what it really looks like. And then that gives your clients the freedom to kind of just go for it and actually let themselves go when they're telling the story. And I think that's very special. So, you know, everything you are brings all that amazing stuff to your business. It
does. And I'm really thankful for that. And I really love that. And it's like you say, you know, when we are given a space to just be creative, we're such creative beings. And why would we stifle that in business? You know, we really shouldn't.
No, and I think we're starting to really open up to that, especially with this year that we've had. And I just hope it continues and we don't just go back into old habits, really.
Yeah, me too.
If somebody wants to connect with you, which you must, listeners, you have to connect with this fabulous lady. I insist. If you want to connect with you, what's the best place to do that? We will put links in, Synne, but where do you hang out?
I hang out on LinkedIn. So that's the best place to connect with me, you know, on social media. That's where you and I connected, Jules. So I hope it has a very special place in my heart. And if not, you can go to either lindentree.com or storytellersmagazine.com, which is my editorial.
Fantastic. Yeah. And there's lots of exciting things that you've got in the future in terms of plans. This is just going to continually evolve, isn't it? Beautifully.
Yeah. I'm really excited.
So I am too. So just to finish, what's your kind of parting words for the listeners? What would you say to them? The one thing that you've learned on this amazing journey that you've been on. What's the one thing you want to tell them?
I want to tell them that there is just nothing more powerful or beautiful than your own story. And when you are brave enough to really embrace it in its whole, whether that's as a company or as a person, and share it, it's just magic. So do it. Lovely. It's the best thing, isn't it, ever? Yeah. Thank you so much, Synne, for joining me on the Human Conversation. Thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely. Thank you, Jules. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this amazing journey you've been on around the world with this fabulous young lady. Honestly, I'm in awe of her. I find her very inspiring. I hope you do too. She's a very gentle soul. And if you want to connect with anyone regarding storytelling, you have to connect with Synne. I hope you've enjoyed the Human Conversation. Please like and subscribe to the platform where you listened. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher and SoundCloud, all the S's. And you can watch our beautiful conversation on YouTube. Yay! Thanks again, Synne. Bless your heart. Have a fabulous day, darling. Thank you, Jules. You too. Bye. And listeners, I will see you again soon. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening and see you next time.